but nobody's printing. Diana Taurasi was right. This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league, and she's a rookie.
Geno Auriemma, who just became the winningest coach of all time, is watching his UConn empire crumble in viewership, even while maintaining dominance on the court. And all this is happening precisely when women's basketball is experiencing its greatest moment of popularity in history, driven by a player who is doing something that no one has managed to do. When Geno Auriemma arrived in Connecticut in 1985, no one could have imagined that young Italian coach would transform an unknown program into the greatest dynasty in college basketball history. The numbers are almost impossible to believe. 11 national championships, 22 Final Fours, and over 1,000 toured victories. But perhaps the most impressive thing was what happened between 2014 and 2017. It was during this period that the Huskies did something that seemed straight out of a fiction movie. For 111 consecutive games, no one managed to defeat UConn. That's right, more than 100 games without a single loss. To put it in perspective, not even the greatest men's teams in history, with all their glamour and media coverage, came close to this extraordinary feat. But it wasn't just the numbers that made UConn a legend. Auriemma's program became a true star factory. Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, Sue Bird, Breanna Stewart, the list of players who passed through stores reads like a basketball hall of fame. Each of them not only dominated college basketball, but revolutionized the professional sport. And when everyone thought they had seen everything UConn could offer, the program managed to reinvent itself. Season after season, decade after decade, the Huskies maintained a level of excellence that seemed impossible to sustain. The public no longer wondered if UConn would win, but by how many points. But in 2021, something would happen that would change everything. Paige Busekers arrived in stores carrying the kind of expectation that could crush any 18-year-old athlete. The country's #1 recruit was about to enter a program where being excellent was just the minimum expected. But what happened in her first season surpassed even the most optimistic expectations of UConn's most fervent fans. In just a few months, Paige did something that no other freshman had achieved in 5 decades of women's college basketball. She was named the country's best player by the Associated Press. Her combination of scoring ability, supernatural court vision, and natural charisma not only dominated the courts, but also won millions of followers on social media. Paige's impact was so great that when name, image, and likeness rules were changed, she instantly became one of the most valuable college athletes in the country. Gatorade and Nike rushed to sign contracts with the new basketball sensation, who seemed destined to take UConn's legacy to new heights. But then, in December 2021, came the moment no one could predict. A knee injury, surgery, and suddenly the player who seemed destined to be the next big name in women's basketball was forced to watch from the bench. Paige's absence would last not just months, but entire seasons. And while she fought to recover, a new star was beginning to shine in Iowa, forever changing the landscape of women's college basketball. While Paige faced her battle against injuries, a quiet revolution was beginning in Iowa. Caitlin Clark wasn't just playing basketball, she was redefining what we thought was possible on a court. Her half-court shots, which seemed reckless to some, began to find the net with frightening frequency. Soon, what seemed like madness transformed into her trademark. But it wasn't just the long shots that made Clark special. The numbers began to accumulate in a way that seemed unreal. She wasn't just breaking women's basketball records, she was surpassing marks that giants of the men's sport took decades to establish. In January 2024, a regular game against Ohio State transformed into a cultural event, attracting 1.93 million viewers on Fox, the highest audience in history for a regular season women's college basketball game. The Clark effect transformed each Iowa game into a must-see event. Tickets sold out in minutes. Packed arenas became routine. Her jersey became one of the best-selling in all of college basketball, surpassing even male stars. Wherever Iowa played, lines wrapped around blocks, with fans desperate to see what Clark would do next. But perhaps most impressive is how Clark changed the conversation about women's basketball. It was no longer a question of comparison with the men's game. She had created her own category. People didn't watch her games out of obligation or support for women's sports. They watched because they didn't want to miss the next magical moment that would surely happen. And while Clark dominated headlines and broke viewership records, an uncomfortable question began to emerge in the halls of stores. Basketball history is full of great rivalries, But the contrast between Paige and Caitlin Clark offers something different, something that transcends traditional comparisons. On one side, we have Paige, the chosen heir of the greatest program in history, trained to be the next in a lineage of legends. On the other, Clark, a revolutionary who built her own empire from scratch in Iowa, breaking not just records, but also the unwritten rules of how the game should be played. The timing made this story even more fascinating. When Paige was forced away from the courts due to injury, Clark began her meteoric rise. The vacuum left by the UConn Stars' absence was filled by a player who wasn't afraid to shoot from the half-court logo, who made magical passes seem routine, who transformed ordinary games into cultural events. The media naturally fell in love with Clark's narrative. Her spectacular style of play generated instant headlines and viral videos that dominated social media. There's a certain irony in seeing Geno Auriemma, the coach who just became the biggest winner in college basketball history, struggling with a different kind of challenge. In press conferences, his responses began to carry a different weight. It wasn't anger, nor resentment, but something deeper, the frustration of seeing the program he built over 4 decades begin to lose its magnetism, even while continuing to win. In a particularly revealing moment after a convincing victory, Auriemma let slip something that seemed to have been keeping for a long time. "We built something special here," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and concern. "Something that elevates the level of the sport as a whole. And sometimes it seems like people simply assume our victories are guaranteed, that there's nothing special anymore about watching UConn play." The press room, usually noisy, fell silent. Most intriguing is that this diminishing public interest doesn't reflect a drop in the team's level of play. The Huskies continue to be one of the dominant forces in the sport, regularly reaching the final stages of the national tournament and developing some of the country's best players. It's as if the program had become a victim of its own success, with excellence becoming so common that it lost its ability to surprise. For someone who revolutionized women's basketball, who helped transform it from a niche sport into a cultural phenomenon, seeing interest decline precisely when the sport is exploding in popularity is particularly painful. But while some would see this as the end of an era, in UConn's meeting rooms, plans were already being made for what could be the greatest comeback in program history. In a sport that never stops evolving, UConn's 2024 story offers us a fascinating lesson about adaptation and legacy. The program that for so long defined excellence in women's college basketball now finds itself at a unique crossroads: how to maintain its essence while adapting to a new world where victories alone are no longer enough to capture the public's imagination. But perhaps that's exactly what makes this moment so special. As Geno Auriemma celebrates his historic win record, as Paige Bueckers returns to the courts, and as women's basketball experiences its moment of greatest popularity, UConn has the opportunity to redefine once again what it means to be a college sports powerhouse. What began as a story about a program losing media space might end up becoming something much bigger, a testament to the ability to reinvent without losing identity. After all, if there's one program that has repeatedly proven its ability to transcend expectations, to transform challenges into opportunities, that program is UConn. The only question that remains is, what story will they write next? And now I want to know from you, do you think UConn will be able to reinvent itself once again? Tell me in the comments what you think about this. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. See you next time.